this is still during the honeymoon phase where I'm like, I am complete. Like things are going to be great. I have all these expectations about the future that are about to, that I'm unwittingly about to get knocked over.
Anybody who goes for this surgery, they need to know this information.
Anyone considering it, right? The information, I assume, was absolutely not available to you when you were sold the Cadillac of surgeries.
Right. No, it might have been in some fine print in a stack of documents that I had to sign for the surgery, but no one had any vested interest in helping me understand the reality of these surgeries. And they start asking the very basic questions, like, what does it mean to be transgender? And I'm like, I know what that means. It means I was born in the wrong body, I'm like, well, what does that mean? And then it doesn't take a few whys before I realize that I don't have any good answers. I had built an identity around rejecting him.
Okay.
And once I realized that, I almost felt like I wanted to toss the identity like a hot potato.
Welcome, Airiel, to the podcast.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are delighted to have you. I am especially delighted to have you because you wrote an essay that was published in October, I believe, I've been thinking about it ever since. Peter Boghossian shared it with me in October, and I honestly have been thinking about it ever since. So before we get to that and the contents of that essay, could you introduce yourself and give us the background, your story of how you come to be talking to us today?
Yeah. So I'm Airiel D. Salvatore. I also go by Airie. I guess I label myself as a detransitioner. When I was young, through abuse, essentially, gender dysphoria was kind of crystallized in a specific incident. And then later in life, when I started to go through puberty, I experienced a lot of gender dysphoria. And that kind of culminated into this idea of being transgender after kind of being exposed to, I guess, like a body modification documentary, like early days, and then finding a community of other people who identified as transgender back in the MySpace days. So we're talking like early, mid 2000s.
Wow.
And started cross-sex hormones at 16 years old, or I think pretty close to the beginning of 16 years old. I was still a bit of a late bloomer in terms of puberty, but I'd already started, so there was no puberty blockers. It was just blocking testosterone and taking estrogen. And I stayed on them for quite a long time. In 2013, when I was around 25, I had saved up enough money to go have bottom surgery. I opted for the vaginoplasty, which was marketed as the Cadillac version of the surgeries, the fancier version. And I'm like, hey, if I'm going to get this, yeah.
That was on the marketing material.
Well, when I talked to my doctor about the different options, because I was like, oh, I guess I'm within the range to start thinking about and planning getting the surgery in terms of saving up money. I talked to my doctor about the different kinds of surgeries, and I wasn't much of a big researcher, so I very much relied on and trusted the medical institution. And he mentioned that there was the penile inversion one, and then there was one called the vaginoplasty, which is where they take part of the large intestine and they use that for the inside. And at this time, I truly believe that if I could live and pass as female as close as possible, then I would be happy. That it would solve a lot of my problems. And so if I'm going to go through this extreme body modification and live the rest of my life like this, then I want something that's as close to the real thing as possible. Although I wasn't under the illusion that there was any reproductive capacity or anything. But I at least thought it would be a mucous membrane and it would resemble a vagina, and I would at least be able to be, intimate with a partner. And so I got that surgery when I was 25. This will be a fun story, but I literally flew to Thailand by myself to have this massive invasive surgery, and ended up and stayed there for a month.
Wow. Okay, there are many questions I have here. First of all, just the basics. Where were you, and what's the documentary that first introduced this to you? Just the really like basic facts here.
Yeah. So, um,
Where were you living?
so during this time when I was younger, I was living with my mom and my grandma. So, a troubled home life really acts as the setting and the backdrop for a lot of this story. Um, my I can kind of quickly go through it. I think it's pretty important. My mom and her brothers and my grandmother were extremely abused by my grandmother's husband, their father, of my mom and uncle's
Mm.
father. Very abusive. He was into the drug scene. He grew and distributed drugs. Um, I remember just stories of abuse. Someone's chewing too loud at the dinner table. He just walks up and says nothing and smacks them out of their chair. He beat my grandmother. My grandmother almost had to use a gun to defend herself a few times. And so I remember all my mom and my uncle. I think they were just they were really terrified. Like he had instilled in them a kind of terror where he could
Mm.
control them. And when I was 2 years old, I think 1 or 2 years old, my grandfather got his oldest son murdered. Um, Officially under the record, it was considered a suicide, but the evidence didn't line up. And the kind of situation, I'm pretty sure he got him into a situation that got him killed.
Oh
Wow.
my God.
Wow.
And it devastated my family. I mean, it destroyed my family. From that point on, my mother struggled with suicidality, tons of mental health issues. We're talking, um, I think, bipolar, possibly schizophrenia on my mother's side. I walked in at one time when I was 9 years old on my mom laying in the bathroom floor trying to overdose on pills. My grandma
Goodness.
was essentially just trying to hold everything together. She was the most stable in terms of having a job. I think I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like losing a son, especially to someone you fought tooth and nail to get him away from. And so,
Okay.
she was pretty emotionally unavailable a lot, but she's always the person I can go and just wrap my arms around. You know, she took care of the bills. Um, my dad left when I was 2, got a girlfriend. They moved to Idaho. My dad had a lot of problems.
And what state are you living in at this point?
California,
Okay.
in
Okay.
California, a suburb of in kind of Central Valley area.
I
Okay.
can hear how harrowing it sounds, wretchedly difficult. Um, but had gender dysphoria made any entrance into your life in early childhood?
It made an entrance when I was about 7. When I was forced to go stay with my dad. So basically, every single memory I conjure of my father, I can imagine since the very very beginning, the very earliest memories. Always, I just remember being terrified of him and not wanting to be around him.
Mm.
I didn't realize when I was a child, but I came to realize it's part of my detransition, or I guess I can kind of get into that when we get there. It's a bit kind of a reveal. Um, the amount of good memories I have of my father, I can count on one hand.
Oh God.
And I was a pretty sensitive kid. I was really sensitive, really prone to overstimulation. I'm pretty sure I'm on the autism spectrum. Like I haven't been officially diagnosed, but I mean it lines up. And
Any what you would consider gender nonconformity, any effeminate traits as a child, or just sensitive?
I think sensitivity more describes it than necessarily gender nonconformity.
Yeah.
Although there wasn't no rough and tumble play, but there was definitely shying away of rough and tumble play with other people. You know, one of the things that kept me sane a lot through the late early years and early teenage years was I skateboarded a lot. That was how I essentially just got addicted to being in the flow state that comes with being engaged in an activity. And it's usually really healthy for the mind to spend a lot of time in a flow state working towards something instead of just
Yeah.
ruminating. So that was a good outlet for me. But there are many moments, and then also when I stop rumination, like I tend to overthink, I tend to ruminate. My mind, it tries to solve its problems by trying to understand the world around me, by trying to make models and to try to make hypotheses and to just look for explanations.
So the gender dysphoria, you said it started with one particular event. Gender dysphoria, by that we're talking just a discomfort with being male, your male
Yeah.
sex body. What was the event that triggered it?
So when I was about, I think 7, maybe 8, my mom was going through severe mental health issues, and this was just before this had happened, was probably the best situation that my family was in even until this day. And it was my mom and my grandma kind of working together. We didn't even have an apartment, like we had a house. It was nice. We didn't own a house, right? It was just renting. We lived in a neighborhood with other houses, and they were both paying the bills, and I was going to school, and this was about 3rd grade. And so this is when it really starts to show that my home life starts to fall apart. My mom starts going through mental health issues. She tries committing suicide. All throughout this time, I'm not doing well in school. Neither of them are like, let's sit down and do your homework. Neither of them, that I can remember, even to this day, haven't placed any value on education. And so, at first it was like, do well because we don't, kind of, I don't want your teachers to be like, what's going on, and like pushing and poking me, like parents generally need to be involved in encouraging their kids to do well in school. And so I'm really just kind of entertaining myself with video games or whatever my attention span is kind of interested in, and it's definitely not homework. And so from early on, I'm kind of just doing my own thing a lot. After the suicide attempt, my mom and grandma get into a fight that lasts a long time until my mom decides she's going to go stay with her boyfriend, and she's going to send me to live with my dad. And she knows how I feel about my dad, and my grandma and me are both just begging her, like, please just let me stay here. And part of me suspects that she sent me to live with him to spite my grandmother. Um,
And
and
you're
so I
7? Are you 7 years old?
about 7 years old,
Okay.
and so I go to stay with him. And the first few days are usually really chill, and then, every time I visit him, essentially the behavior is the first few days are good because he's kind of happy to see me. He doesn't hate me. I think, looking down with what I know now, he's a person. He loves his kid, and he struggles with his own demons. Um, but that only really comes out like once in a while. You get a few rays of sunshine in a really, really stormy, cloudy season where the sky almost never breaks. It's kind of how it felt to me. I only ever once in a while catch these glimpses of feeling like he actually wants to be around me, because most of the time he's either ignoring me or all of a sudden he's yelling at me and freaking out about something I did. Sometimes, I'm being a kid, I'm getting into trouble. And then other times I'm like, this was perfectly fine for the last 2 weeks. Why is he exploding on me now?
Mm.
It's about this like sporadic behavior, just constantly exploding. It's like he's taking out things on me. And I didn't realize it at the time. But what I later came to find out is that he was a meth addict. And
Oh.
so was his girlfriend, who he ended up marrying, who
Oh.
became my stepmom, who was also a part of this picture, who I also lived with. When I went to live with my dad for 3 months, she was there, right? And I swear sometimes she was worse than he was. They were both like this. She constantly reminded me that she did not want me around. Like I was this reminder that of like his past being with somebody else. And I never got warm. I don't remember ever getting warm moments from her. Just both. I was their punching bag. I was their emotional punching bag. And I was a child. And my father, he struggled with his own masculinity, and so he would assert dominance all the time, not just with me, but with strangers. Right? He would assert himself because that's what he thought being a man was.
Mm.
He used to brag. He bragged to me about getting kicked out of a Walmart and permanently banned for getting into a fight with someone in line, a physical fight. And my dad would tell me it was something along the lines of it was like the person either cut him or it perceived like he was being cut or something. And my dad's like, "You gonna get behind me or what?" Like, or is this, or are we gonna, you gonna get behind me or are we gonna do this? And the person just being like, I don't know, let's see, like kind of calling his bluff. And so my dad just tackles the guy. And then my stepmom pulls out a knife.
Whoa. Okay.
You know,
Wow. Okay. Is this the point that you decide you don't want to be a boy? You don't want to be male? You don't want, because this is your role model? What?
That specific thought comes about, maybe I stayed with him for 3 months. That becomes my thought after about a month-long escapade of every other day me getting in trouble, him freaking out, me disassociating, and then him shaking me and telling me to be a man. Answer me. Be a man. Are you a little girl? Do you want to be a little girl? Answer me. Over and over and over. And this lasts this entire trip. And more in my head, I begin to repeat to myself, I wish I was a girl. I wish I was a girl because maybe he wouldn't treat me like this.
And what year would this be? Do you know what year this approximately?
I think about 1996. I was born in 89.
Okay. So the idea that you could be a girl is just about forming in the universe, in the political movement. The idea that a kid can be trans is not quite unleashed yet, but it's coming.
Yeah. Building that
Okay.
potential energy, right?
Yeah.
In the culture.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just repeat this for this whole trip. And disassociation is the tool that, like, I had already begun to utilize it from the other trips, but this time it became my superpower. It allowed me to get enough distance from him to, like, it's like I literally transported to another universe, just disassociating so hard. And later in my life, I remember him telling me that he was proud that I wasn't a crier, that I didn't cry, because I have a little half brother. The last time I saw my dad was when I was like 12 or 13. And my half brother was old enough to kind of speak and run around, and he cried a lot. And I remember my father telling me that he's like, you know what? I'm proud that you don't cry like he does. And it was because I wasn't there to cry. I was disassociating so much. I wasn't even there.
What do you mean by disassociating? How did that look for you, or how did that, manifest?
It's like my focus. Normally we focus on the things that are in front of us in the present moment. It's like my attention and focus learned how to become so diffuse that I wasn't experiencing what was right in front of me. Like my mind's, our minds take sensory information from what we see, and it's constructing a world model. And it's like it learned how to, like a lens. Like imagine a camera lens where you can kind of focus it, and you can
Yeah.
have most of the whole picture in view, or you can kind of make it so there's one item that's clear and the background is blurry and even the foreground is blurry. It's like it learned how to just dial things such that everything was blurry, and I just wasn't there. Like I couldn't feel being shaked until I was smacked, and I would kind of be forced into the present with like a yelp, and then I would just fade into a fuzz again.
Wow. And how did that pan out over the years then? So that's, when kind of the trauma got in. Well, I think you were already traumatized, but something kind of got magnified and directed towards, girl, boy, whatever. What happened
Yeah.
then, and as the years went by?
Yeah. So after I went back home. My mother immediately saw that it was a huge mistake. I don't think she struggles to this day. I think she struggles to forgive herself for that. I slowly went back, like maybe I don't know how long it took, but I slowly just reacclimated to being a normal kind of little boy again. I, ran around with some friends. I got back. I think that's when I got kind of into skateboarding. I saw someone do it, and I was like, I want one of those, and I started riding around. Or I was playing video games, or you know, um, trading Pokemon cards. Back when those things started, and then around 12 or 13 is when I start to go through puberty. And already at this time, I was beginning to, um, you know, my inability to recognize what healthy, emotionally mature relationships looked like, because I did not have that to model as a kid, began to show itself by being friends with other people who had their own trauma, who also couldn't model these relationships, where you just have a bunch of people kind of latch onto each other for comfort, not know how to set boundaries, and then you have these maladaptive, um, you know, relationships that would border on abuse or coercion, things like that. I started to go through puberty, and so all of a sudden, social status becomes front and center. Where you stand in your social connections, the strength of your social connections, who you know. Junior high school, it's a tough time for everyone. I think it's especially a tough time for girls for those social reasons. And I think it's mostly just me being friends with people who weren't healthy for me, and me not being able to get any kind of intellectual and emotional stimulation or security from my parents. Just all of these things that are normally in place for a normal child not being there culminated in a kind of anxiety, a kind of discomfort, just uneasiness. I found myself a lot throughout my life willing to be friends with someone rather than to be alone. And I spent a lot of time at the skate park riding my skateboard. And there's kind of a little bit of a difference between friend groups where you go out of your way to meet up, to hang out, versus people who come to a space to do a mutual activity together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, man, that was really the only thing kind of keeping me sane, was just having a kind of a sport. And I still wasn't doing well in school. I had already been held back in 3rd grade, and 7th grade went really poorly, to the point where we're going to hold you back again. Back when they didn't just try to pass you. There was basically this one year. It was the year. It was like one of the only years where I did really well in school, because the condition was, if you get at least B's or something, then you don't get held back and you can go on to high school. And so I had a little bit of structure there. But as the general anxiety, discomfort, inability to kind of fit in and to recognize autistic traits, and like with having no idea of what's happening, this idea becomes to come back in my head. I'm like, I kind of want to be a girl. Like, I don't want to be a boy. It doesn't seem like I fit well being a boy. Over the course of that year, that just kind of ramps up more and more. And as the pain goes up more and more, I'm just like, it keeps coming back. And this is back in the time where, everyone was calling each other like homophobic slurs and stuff. Any and all feelings of being bisexual as well were just like internalized homophobia. And so more and more, I'm just like, I wish I was a girl, until I found myself so distressed that I'd really latched on to, like, okay, this seems to be a permanent feeling. There's something here. I don't know what it is, but go ahead.
And did you think you were bisexual, or did you have same-sex attraction, or was that coming into play?
It definitely wasn't front or center until after I had, until after I had accepted the term transgender and kind of took that on as my framing. And then I began to explore more about bisexual feelings. But before that, it was probably just pure denial. So I don't even think it was on my radar to even, I didn't even want to think about that idea, because I'm different
And
enough, you know?
I hear you. And do you remember when you first came across transgender or kind of lent into it?
Yeah, it was around 8th grade, I believe. There was some documentary on TV. My grandma just watched a lot of TV. She just sat with a beer in front of the TV, and that's how all of her after work time was mostly spent. And, you know, I was more than welcome to hang out with her and talk with her and watch and stuff, but she had her TV. And there was a documentary about body modification, and I remember it talking about the different kinds, all the way from piercing to, you know, kind of ramping up to the most extreme
Oh.
body modifications. And it talked about, like, you know, the tribes that put like discs in their lips and stuff.
Mhm.
And then it showed, you know, the people who tattoo their whole bodies and then get implants to make, you know, lumps and bumps to look like scales, or the tribes that would have their ceremonies of to become a man, go through this trial where they would take razor blades and just cut strips on your back to look like crocodile
Oh.
indentations that scarred. And, and then it was like and then it was like, you know, the final boss, like, what is the most extreme form of body modification? It's the people who take cross-sex hormones, you know, mutilate their genitalia, and to try and look and pass as the opposite sex. And I'm
Wow.
like, so you can actually do this.
And
It's
so this
possible.
is wow. So it wasn't. I in my mind, I thought it was a kind of trans activism, laying the groundwork, presenting trans as this healthy, natural way to be a person. That's the kind of documentary I thought you were talking about. But you're talking about something else completely.
I'd love
Yeah,
to see it.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
me
remember what it
too.
was
I
called?
definitely not. But it was really early days, right? We're talking like
Yeah.
early
99,
2000s here, you know,
early
and
2000s, yeah.
this is before I get online and meet people.
Yeah.
You know, this is I'm trying to like remember the exact timeline here. When I see that documentary, what happens? I'm in 8th grade. I get to high school and I'm not quite out yet. I'm out to my grandma. I'm out to my
Out
friends.
as
I'm
trans.
transgender.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
High school goes terribly. I don't do any like almost any schoolwork except for like math because it's the only thing that gives me it's the only thing that's not uncomfortable because it's like is there like clear yes or no, correct or wrong? Um, and wood shop because I like working with my hands. And besides that, I do terribly. I'm kind of like I'm in with like a misfit group, and I'm out to them about being transgender. I have some friends start using female pronouns.
And presenting in a certain way, or it's just an identity?
So it's mostly an identity. So
Mhm.
here's the interesting thing. Um, most of this through most of this, I'm so deeply insecure that there's no way that I'm going to dress in a feminine way because I'll just look like a cross dresser, and that's going to draw all of this attention, negative tension. You know, and there was a point towards the end of that year where I started wearing like girl pants. People would walk by and be like, "Look how tight these guys' pants are." You know, like people just make fun of each other all the time, and so like I if anyone has gone through school in the last like 10, 15 years, they're probably going to be like, "What are you talking about?" But like back then, you know, people just call each other homophobic slurs constantly.
Yeah.
Nobody bats an eyelash. Nobody cares. Teachers don't care. You know, like school's brutal. It's kind of brutal now in like in a different way. You know, but you know, human nature will find an outlet.
Yeah, the overcorrection. It was brutal. Bullying was terrible. So the anti bullying movement came along, and then we got this overcorrection
Yeah,
where you have to affirm every single identity. The person who identifies as a cat, you can't
yeah,
call them strange.
yeah. But human beings bully by nature. And so now you have cry bullies, you have people, you know, coercing and manipulating each other for self-righteous causes. It's just like another
Yeah.
shape of bullying, really.
Yeah,
Lord of the Flies was brilliant, really. You
yeah,
know, William
yeah.
Golding, what an amazing novel. I'm just thinking, so like you're in school about, am I right, 2003, 2004, and viewing and calling yourself transgender,
Yeah, transgender.
transsexual,
Well, yeah, was
transgender.
Yeah.
transgender a word then, or was
It
it
was the word.
transsex?
It
It
was the
was a
word
word, yeah.
since
Yeah, that was the
96.
word I was
Yeah.
using. I don't remember using transsexual actually, so it might
Because
have been
that
like
meant
right on the
medicalization.
border
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And did you know anybody else? Were you the only person in the
No,
school? I'm
I
just
was
into.
the only person.
Okay,
In fact,
that's
when I came out as when I had told myself, okay, I think I might be this thing called transgender. I didn't even really have a lot of. I don't even didn't even have many interactions with gay people actually.
yeah, because you strike me as somebody like, and I've met many of them who ended up becoming trans in 1985 or 19. You know what I mean? That there always was a small number of people for myriad of reasons who
Yeah.
decided medical transition was the way forward, and that seems to be you. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I was the only one who identified this way, and there was resistance everywhere. I was everyone's first contact with what this word meant.
yeah. And this is not the social contagion. This is what I find fascinating about this story is you're not a social contagion kid. You this is the power of the idea, the power of
Yes.
the belief, the idea that you can be trans is just it's out there in society and it just lands in the occasional fertile mind and yours in an extreme state of vulnerability that happened to be your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So take us from when the idea has landed, you are convinced you're trans. What do you take? What action do you take next?
So I decide that what I need is to transition. That I need to see a doctor so I can get hormone replacement therapy, or at the time, just you know, I guess cross-sex hormones to start modifying my body. This is also around the time when I think I first got a computer. And
Mm.
so, this was back when the computers came with the giant glass monitors that were huge. And you have a computer room, and you essentially this was right when kind of MySpace was getting started, and this was like one of the first social media websites where people had profiles, and you can go from person to person to person and kind of navigate through these networks to find communities and stuff.
Mm.
Way, way before there were curated feeds of information. Like if you wanted to see what somebody was posting, you have to go to their profile and look through their posts.
Mm.
And I find I don't forget how, other trans people. It's what I meet um, lesbians, gay men, and people who identify as transgender. And at that time, right, gender identity and the idea of a gendered essence, this wasn't part of the mainstream at all. Maybe we had slightly different explanations for ourselves, but it was mostly something like something is wrong with me and I have to modify my body, or I was born in the wrong body, or there is some mismatch, and different people have different stories too, different you know uh, different ways of having expressed it. Like I met someone who was so naturally androgynous that they could more or less kind of pass as female, just being really young before puberty, obviously, and they dressed femininely and just kind of fit in. And I remember feeling kind of envious of them being able to do that. But one thing's for sure, all of the people that I met were from broken homes and were severely mentally ill, and everybody was just in pain, and everybody wanted a solution, and everyone just wanted the pain to stop.
And that's what the belief is. Fix
Yeah,
your body. If you fix your body, the pain will stop. That's what the trans belief is.
yeah,
So you're in California still, and you find your way into a gender clinic?
yeah. So I think I don't. It wasn't specifically a gender clinic, but I remember it was difficult to find. Essentially, what I found was a psychiatrist who was transsexual, who had transitioned maybe a decade prior, because nobody knew anything about this. And I had to see this person maybe a handful of times, and they would write me a recommendation letter for. There was a clinic or a hospital in San Francisco, and I don't know if this was a gender clinic. San Francisco comes back into the picture later, and it's certainly a different clinic than the one I ended up going to later. but I go to a hospital, after a handful of sessions, and I even bring up my father, right? And anybody standing on the outside of this, when I talk about my father, must have been like, oh my goodness. Because for me, I used to tell that story, because like my father would, like I said, would shake me, like, be a man. And there was one particular time where I finally snapped, and I'm like, I wish I was a girl. And I always remember citing that instance as when that's when I knew I was transgender.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. And you had a
And
transgender psychiatrist.
and
Yep.
you see, honestly, everything about your story is just slotting into place in the way
Classic.
I've been looking at it. It is the classic because it's the medical professional is also completely guided by the belief that led you to seek medical help in the first place. When
Yeah.
you go to San Francisco, though, are there any trans identified people in this clinic, or these are just people who do not know what to do with you and give you what you want?
So what I remember it feeling like was, it wasn't entirely rare, but this wasn't a dedicated clinic. And I think that psychiatrists recommended a few people before. And so, they give me cross-sex hormone, testosterone blockers and estrogen, and get me through the process, basically.
Yeah, because your trans identified psychiatrist is going to choose a clinic that is going to provide the treatment that this person believes is essential. Okay. Can you ground me in a year at this point? And how old are you and what year is it? Just so I can keep the timeline clear.
So I think I'm late 15, early 16. This must have been around 2004.
Wow, it's still so early.
Yeah,
Okay.
still
Okay.
early.
Wow.
And once you were kind of in the system, once you had the trans psychiatrist, I think everything was opening up really for you. And did you encounter much resistance, or was the general vibe at the time, how do we help you medically transition? What was the kind of the clinicians' views really then?
Out of all the doctors that I've seen, this one in particular is the most that's fuzzy. The most I can tell you is I don't remember resistance from this doctor. It was more like the gatekeeping was at the psychiatrist level, and I don't think that I must have gotten a prescription the very first time, if not the second time seeing that doctor. It was probably just more like, let's do some blood tests, see where they're at. We'll give you a prescription, and then you'll come back, and we'll do this process, or we'll keep this process. We'll keep an eye on you and stuff.
And do you remember how this starting medical intervention and the early months and years made you feel psychologically?
Yeah, I mean, so at the time, by the time I get onto hormones, freshman year had come and gone, and it was so catastrophically such a failure. And that by the time sophomore year starts,
Can you just is this grade 9 and 10 for the Brits
yes,
and
yes,
the Irish person? Okay.
So what is this age-wise is much better, because I was doing a calculation there trying to figure it out, but 15 or
so this
16
is
or something.
16, 17? Grade
it's
9 and 10?
yeah. So this is I'm trying to line it up here with the medical transition, which is late 15, early 16. So
Okay.
I'm seeing this the psychiatrist in freshman year. I get my prescription at the end of the year, or right
Okay.
between the years.
Okay.
Essentially, like 10th grade, right in the beginning of my second year of high school, the insecurity gets so bad, I drop out of high school.
Okay.
And so school is bad because it's just a constant reminder of like, I'm basically just spending all of my time ruminating, hating myself, hating my body, being disgusted, wanting to change it. And so once I get on the hormones, it's just pure relief.
Okay, and it's going to the estrogen will, and were you taking testosterone blockers as well? That's going to
Yes.
bring down any emerging sexual urges, I assume.
Yeah.
Did that bring some kind of comfort to you?
Yeah, part of it was because I didn't want my body to masculinize anymore, and um, I like struggled when you hit your body and your genitalia. Arousal is a reminder of everything you don't want to be,
Yeah.
and so you develop a kind of self-loathing around your own arousal and sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah. And then a number of years elapsed. Like, to me, it sounds like the trans identity didn't really bring you peace, but the medical intervention did, because it quelled all of those feelings that you were very uncomfortable with. So you how long do you spend in this state before you decide you need the surgery?
That's a good question. I imagine not too long,
Okay.
like because the disgust from my own genitalia never went away, and I wanted the transformation to be as complete as possible, and so it was kind of always in my mind, but yeah, I think I just feel like I always kind of knew that I wanted it, and I became more
And
obsessed as it became more practical and possible.
okay, so I'm interested in the belief. What do you believe at this time? Do you believe that you are a woman trapped in a man's body? Do you believe you are a type of person called trans? What is your core belief at this point?
I think my core belief, I would say that I was transgender,
Mm.
but to be able to define that at the time, I think it meant more of a it's so hard to say. I don't know if I would have necessarily framed it as being born in the wrong body. That was
Mm.
kind of more of an explanation that I slowly onboarded as time went on. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, something is wrong. I was not supposed to be born this way. I was
Yeah.
supposed to be born a girl,
Yeah.
and I don't know why
Mm.
this mismatch is here. But what I know for sure is that if I was a girl, I'd be happier, and then if I could live and pass as female, all this would go away. That was just at the core of it. There was never a coherent definition.
I'm so glad you're speaking about it, because you give people a great insight into where the brain will bring you. Now, I know, because I work with the different people in different contexts, and the same a different person could have channeled that towards eating. If you'd had, you know what I mean, it could have gone a different direction. Imagine if your father shook
Yes.
you about weight, or you know what I mean, it could have gone a different direction, and the brain lands on a solution, and we fixate because it's just so pleasant to have a solution when we're so distressed. GenSpect will be holding the largest ever gathering of detransitioners in Washington, D.C. on Detrans Awareness Day, Thursday, March 12th, and we're looking for your help. This is a historic event. More than 70 detransitioners are already registered to attend our conference, and we want to make it possible for even more to attend. The conference is called Life Beyond Transition. It is designed for detransitioners, parents trying to navigate these issues, and also for lawyers, policymakers, clinicians, educators, and other interested members of the public. Leading researchers, such as Dr. Lisa Lippman, will hold roundtable discussions to identify the most urgent research needs for detransitioners. Please help us make this event a success. You can sponsor a detransitioner to attend, or you can buy an online ticket, or you could join us in person. Visit genspect.org to learn more. So
Yeah.
we're really glad that you're going to be speaking at our event on Detrans Awareness Day in DC on March the 12th. So I can't wait for you to speak, because I think it's a real gift to the world to move beyond certain narratives into a kind of, your narrative is, I suppose I would consider it an in-depth analysis of so many detransitioners that I've met. We've got, at the moment, like in time of recording, we've over 70 people, so over 70 detransitioners who've applied to attend. So
Wow.
yeah, it's an extraordinary number. We'll see if it pans out. We're seeking sponsorship and help on that front. But I'm really glad you chose to speak out about this. Could you tell us where it went from there on, because you're kind of getting going now into actually making, I would say, really quite destructive decisions. You're on hormones at this stage. What happened then?
Yeah. So I'm on hormones, and I'm still. I kind of stayed dropped out of school for a while, and I'm at this point I'm on MySpace, and so I'm meeting other communities that are kind of pulling me more into the madness. Not that no one's doing this intentionally, but everyone becomes part of the very fabric itself that kind of gets pulled into the center. And so I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling relieved. I think that what's happening is, the path of kind of my salvation. So my mood perks up a lot. I'm focusing on my physical activity, and I don't know, I spend maybe I would say a little bit less than a year of having got onto hormones. After having met this community, my grandma's having more and more financial trouble, and she can't pay for these prescriptions, or at least to go to the doctor. Like going to San Francisco, paying to see the doctor. And so I learned from my friends online, like, oh, you could just buy all these hormones online. There was literally a pharmacy, like some pharmacy something.com. And you buy spirolactone, you buy estradiol. There you
And
go,
for people
on a
who are
controlled substance.
surprised, that black market was in existence since the 60s. Do you know what I mean? There was these networks. Corinna Cohn and stuff would be quite a few detransitioners I've met, and transitioners. There was always a black market that was there. This is kind of the online black market beginning, but it was always there as such. Well, for many years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you end up wanting the surgery? Talk us through that. The wanting it and having it.
Oh,
Because this
Yeah.
and
is quite the story.
it really is. Before that, your sex life, like your partners, you're falling in love. Did any of that move you out of it, or did you know what I mean? The usual bonding that would occur in your 20s. How was that going?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is something that's going to seem to go against the direction of like more of like a modern experience. But throughout all of this, I didn't seem to have any trouble dating. And I am primarily attracted to women, and I dated girls in elementary school, even before these feelings really started to take on. And I dated people in high school during transition. And on some level, I thought it was weird too. I'm like, then I'm like, well, if I'm a girl, like, how come I don't like guys more? And I thought like maybe I'm a lesbian or something, just trying to make sense of these things. And 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 I don't know, girls seem to still be. I guess here's kind of one aspect of it that's really interesting. During this time, one of the kind of styles or subcultures that pops up is called scene, and like scene kids, and then after that it was like emo kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these like really androgynous styles. Guys wear tight pants, they have straight hair, they do like the swooshing thing, you know, like and then same with the girls, like these like really big like straight hair, like you have to like really see a picture of it. And so I really adopted the scene style because it was like a free ticket into being more androgynous and away from being masculine. And when I started to take hormones, it just accelerated that androgyny. And and sometimes it's kind of I looked gender ambiguous, like is that a boy, is that a girl? And to me that was just kind of like a benefit. It was a plus. And so to girls I was still attractive in that way.
Okay.
Like I because I fit into that style, and girls were
And
attracted
did
to
you?
guys in that
I
style.
hear you. So that's really interesting and kind of sweet. Did you fall in love? Because I'm interested, if you don't mind. Did you fall in love? Was there a love relationship in your 20s while you were on hormones?
There were a few times where I got really attached to someone and felt like I was in love. You know,
Okay.
I
And did that person love you back?
Yeah.
That's the
yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Nice.
I,
okay.
it's also a little bit hard to say because
And did they
as I
call you
mentioned
she,
earlier,
her? Or did they see you as a woman?
yeah, they would like respect my identity. I mean, like they can't deny the fact that I'm physically male and that I've been feminized, but it's not like they respected my identity, used the pronouns. Yeah.
And you don't need to answer this if you don't want, but were you able to have sex and stuff even though you were on hormones for quite some years?
Yeah, the sex drive was definitely reduced, but I was still able to engage in intercourse. It always came with mixed feelings. I mean, obviously, it was nice to. I mean, I'm being physically intimate in the way that my body was evolved to, so that there's good feelings there. But then there was this huge contrast with that disgust of myself, and so it got in the way of intimacy in that when I would have intercourse, a lot of the times I couldn't help but feel envy. Like, I wish I was in your position. I wish I wasn't me in this position. It was kind of a disembodiment there, which was really interesting.
But there's no I'm sure you're familiar with autogynephilia. You don't think is this an autogynephilic urge or something completely different?
So autogynephilia like formed over time as I was more envious of um, the girl I was with, being intimate with. It was almost like the autoandrophobia helped accelerate some of the autogynephilia because I was attracted to women, but I wish I was. And when I would engage with intercourse with girls, I wish I could be in their position. And so I would imagine being in their position. And when you ruminate on something, you just take it on. So
And is this what leads you to the drastic go to Thailand by yourself and have the surgery?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember being like my late teenage years, not ruminating too much on my genitalia, and then it getting worse in my 20s. And I think it got worse as like the situation I described, being intimate and being envious. Like, I couldn't just
Mm.
be happy, you know. And then after I got and we're skipping. There's so much to this story. um, so if we're talking about the time when I'm going to save for my surgery now. We're actually skipping over 3-4 years of me being in the homeless system in LA and in San Francisco, where there's a
Oh,
whole story in there of it in and of itself.
oh,
But
okay.
just after I kind of graduate from a transitional living program relating to like a homeless network in San Francisco, I'm working in a restaurant. I'm saving money. I'm paying rent for a room in an apartment, and I'm taking care of myself. And then I'm just like, I'm gonna save full speed until I can pay for the surgery. Like, I was just
And
completely committed.
I hear you. That must have been a very difficult time if you were you were homeless for 4 years. Did you say or?
Yes.
From like 20 to 23, I think it was 2009
And were you
all the way through
w-
2012.
were you continuing with hormones while you were homeless? And was that difficult to
Yes,
navigate?
actually, just before becoming homeless, the even buying the hormones online were so expensive that I could only for like a year I was only getting testosterone blockers. And then once I went to the homeless shelter system in LA, it was the first time that I had met um, multiple other trans people in real life. And the homeless shelter systems would have large percentages of trans identified people. I stayed the LGBT center, had like a little homeless shelter in it in, I think, Hollywood. There was a religiously sponsored place called the Covenant House that I stayed in for almost a year. And then I stayed in San Francisco, Larkin Street Youth Services. And then that was a shelter. And then I got into a transitional living program And there were, all throughout this whole system, there were large percentages of people who were trans identified. And even though, especially at the Covenant House, I found strange that I look back on it now. You had like a male wing and a female wing with dorms with 2 bunk beds, so four beds each, and you go where you identify, and it doesn't matter of the process, that the physical process you've taken. And it's weird because there were so many trans people, they could have just put in all the trans people in one room. Like here
Yeah.
are the 3 trans rooms. Here are the female only rooms. You know, they
I'm
could have done that,
interested in
but they
that.
didn't.
Yeah, I'm interested that I've met so many trans people who've spoken about how they were homeless for a few years. Like, I've heard that many times over. In the homeless trans culture, is the feeling of we are, treated badly as a minority, or is it kind of we're really in a very difficult mental state? What is the kind of mentality of when you're trans and homeless?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily get the same kind of victimhood vibes you get nowadays back
Yeah.
then, but everybody was in distress. Um, I think most of us, or at least from my perspective, a lot of the times. Here's another interesting thing. Um, because I didn't know how to model healthy relationships. Whenever things get too bad, I would just flight, and so there were many occasions where I would jump from friend group to friend group, or I often dated people because, people who are hurt latch onto each other for comfort, and sometimes it just has to spiral until you break apart, and then you end up just latching onto somebody else. And so I've been able to kind of bounce from friend groups, and I was always someone's first contact with what it meant to be transgender. And then you give it 2 weeks, and then someone else is starting to interpret their pain as, hey, maybe I'm transgender.
So, I mean, I don't want to put anything on you, but you were very much a vector
Yeah,
for the
I had
contagion
no
because you are
idea.
the first. Yeah, but you're not doing it intentionally. No one along the way is doing it intentionally. It's just an idea that's out there, and everyone, I think, everyone's innocent in the contagion, but the idea takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I remember people telling me, like, I think I'm transgender, and I'm like, are you sure? Like, this is a real hard road. Like, if you do not want to go down this road if you don't have to, you know. That was my general sentiment. But if someone was persistent enough, I mean, who's not going to take comfort in the idea of, oh my goodness, there's someone like me,
Yeah.
you know? And so,
Okay, so let's get to this Thailand trip, because I did the idea to go to Thailand come from MySpace. What social media are we talking now? MySpace is over, right? Where are we up to on?
yeah, MySpace is still kind of happening a little bit. Facebook's on the scene now.
Okay.
Um, so the idea to go to Thailand was basically, my doctor mentions the vaginoplasty. I'm like, who doesn't want to get the deluxe body modification if you're going to do it? And so I'm trying to do research and figure out which doctors in the United States I can go see to do this surgery. And almost no one does this surgery except for a few. And the real issue isn't necessarily the price, it's the fact that, no one's covering this stuff with insurance. And if you want this invasive surgery, you have to rest in a hospital bed for like well over a week,
Mm,
and the price of just the hospital stay alone is like $30,000-$40,000.
okay.
And I'm just like, this is not doable here. And so I ask other people, and Thailand's had a huge culture of ladyboys for a very long time, and they're quite experienced with doing these incredibly invasive body modification surgeries. And so I start looking at other institutions, and I find a plastic surgery institute in Bangkok, um, Thailand, who does this surgery. And they get so many people contacting them that essentially they have a whole package.
Mm,
All you have to do is you buy the plane ticket to show that you've committed, and then um, you know we will basically book your hotel for you. We'll pick you up at the airport. We'll drive you to the hotel. We'll drive you to the consultations. We'll have someone walk you through the process. You pay us the money, and then we'll have someone to drive you back to the hotel, take you to the hospital, check in on you after the surgery. Like this, it's like a whole package.
wow. Wow.
Did you have any reservations? Did you have any kind of, I shouldn't be doing this?
No, not a single one. I was when you don't have any real role models in real life to model, you look to model anything that you find yourself looking up to. And
And
so I found my role model in fiction, TV shows, heroes, anime. My hero was somebody who, despite not having any parents, despite everyone treating them like crap, seeing them as a demon, they literally fight tooth and nail to become the best version of themselves. They literally will die to fulfill their dream and to become somebody. And I was so absolutely convinced that this surgery was required for my for to me to be complete, to fulfill my dream, to be happy. I was literally willing to fly to Thailand by myself and die on that operating table.
Wow.
and how did it go? How did the recovery go?
Yeah.
How did the whole thing go?
Um, Luckily, it went smooth. The hospital bed was very comfortable. It was morphine. You don't have to. I basically laid in that bed for a week. I remember one of the most uncomfortable feelings of my life was when they pulled all of the gauze out of it. They gotta cut into your abdomen. They gotta pull out part of your large intestine, disassemble the genitalia completely, create the cavity. There's a muscle about 4 inches deep in there that gets in the way, so you gotta cut through it. You gotta put the large intestine through that. You gotta stuff it full of gauze. It's really hardcore.
Yeah.
I remember, so they pulled out the gauze. That was a feeling. Um, uh, it took about 4 or 5 days to get me on my feet, start using the bathroom on my own again, and to be able to like kind of waddle around basically. After a week and things looked good, back to the hotel, and I spent 3 weeks recovering in the hotel. No major complications, although dilating on an open wound, that is a insane experience. And to make matters even worse, my grandma's allergic to cell phones. Basically, she's the only family member that I have any real kind of connection to at this point. My relationship with my mom is toast. Um, I My grandma was supposed to come with me, and she bailed towards as the date approached because she was like, I can't be in another country. Like, she was a hermit. When I said, when she spent her time in front of the TV after work every day, like that was her spot. She's very limited comfort zone. She couldn't do it. But that I didn't even bat an eyelash. I'm like, I'm still going. And so out of contact. I don't have contact with her. I literally the only person that I'm in contact with is the girl who is my girlfriend now. We met 2 weeks before I flew to Thailand, and we've been together for over 12 years.
Wow.
And how is she? She's got a boyfriend who's on hormones, who is her girlfriend at the time. She's only gone out with you for 2 weeks, but you're presenting as a trans woman. So she presumably called you she, her, and you went over to Thailand. And she's rolling with this. And did she say, what about my sex life, I wonder?
Uh, um, so we became friends 2 weeks before, but we didn't. It was
Okay,
on this
sorry.
trip, talking with each other, where we kind of fell in love, basically.
Oh.
Oh.
And so she's never seen me fully intact in that sense.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I guess that wasn't on my radar. I would not, I mean, I how is my sex life going to be after surgery? Well, I guess I'll be able to have sex the way that I always wanted to be able to.
What?
That's kind of what I thought. I wasn't really thinking that this was primarily going to be aesthetic. And one of the luckiest things about the surgery is that they were able to maintain nerve connection, so that tissue from the end of the penis that becomes the clitoris has feeling. And so it's not, I'm still able to be intimate with myself and other people kind of in that way, at least. But penetration doesn't, it's not a thing. I mean, because of the, like, basically one of the most hardcore things about this surgery is you have the tissue from the outside, which is skin, right? Outer skin
Mm-hmm.
connecting with the mucous membrane. And if you look very closely at like the edges of your lip or the edges of your eye, you'll see it like a transitionary part of tissue, right? Because different tissue form
Oh yeah.
follows function in evolution, and different tissues have different functions. And
Okay.
so the way that, you know, your skin kind of transitions here, they have different properties. You know,
Yeah.
mucous membrane has a different elasticity than outside skin, and with this surgery, you have them directly connected with each other that they're trying to stitch together. And so when you stretch the skin, the inside mucous membrane stretches more than the outside, and so you basically have all these little micro tears that happen. Like, imagine taking imagine taking denim, cutting out a square, and then taking spandex, cutting out the same size square, and stitching them together, and then stretching it.
Oh wow.
Okay.
The
Okay.
tissues are going to pull away from each other, and so
Of
any
course.
kind of penetration is going to come with bleeding and tearing, no matter what.
And
Oh.
did you discover that?
Oh yeah, afterwards. None of
Oh.
this was on my radar.
Oh, goodness me.
And can I
Okay.
ask you something? And please don't answer if you don't want to. But I do wonder, and I do believe in, you know, the truth will set us free and all that. Like, is the orgasm the same? You said you were able to manage to orgasm because they retained the tip of your penis. Is it the same as what you would have orgasmed, even though you were testosterone blocked male? W- Is it the same type
Y-
of orgasm?
Yeah,
Is it the
yeah,
same sensation?
because I had blocked testosterone and took estrogen for so long that the testicles never continued to develop through puberty, and so it never looked like there was sperm in the ejaculation. It was just the clear orgasm fluid that comes from the prostate. And so when you're chemically castrated, your prostate produces a lot less of it. And so before, an ejaculation would be really small, if anything comes out at all, and it was clear that there was no sperm from mine. And so after surgery, it felt like a little bit the same, right? I mean,
But what about the sensation of orgasm? How does that compare before and after? You don't have to answer.
yeah, I think it's almost the same. It didn't seem too much like, I don't remember, you know, after everything healed and having orgasmed, I don't remember being like, wow, this is way worse. Like, I think it was roughly the same, but my sex drive did reduce even further not having any testicles.
Okay. And I want to know what's going through your mind in those, what you're in hospital, you're in the hospital for 7 days, and then you're in a hotel room by yourself with no family or loved ones looking after you. What is going through your mind? Are there any doubts? Are there any, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done this, or this is not what I thought it was going to be, or this hurts far more? Or were you still sure that this was the right thing to do?
I was still sure it was the right thing to do. I remember thinking this dilation process is excruciating. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being, I hope it's not always going to be like this. Like, I knew it was a wound and that it was going to hurt more now than after, but I didn't, you know, I was explicitly hoping it wasn't always going to be like that, and that, you know, that was that, you know, this was worse than I thought. This is a problem, but it's still better than hating myself 24/7.
Yeah. And you have hope.
Yeah,
That's
I
what's
have hope.
going to keep you going, if you have hope that it will get better. Okay.
And people often think, you know, I've met, you know, trans identified people, they always think the next intervention will make me feel like a woman. The next intervention will make me feel like a woman. Did you think, I'm going to get this vaginoplasty in Thailand, dangerous as it is, and then I will reach the destination? Was that how you were thinking of it? And did it pan out like that?
Yeah, it was, I felt like this was the destination. I wasn't super interested in a lot of other surgeries, I guess. Like, my all this facial hair is from after detransitioning. before, when I was on hormones, fully grown out, you couldn't really see much, so I didn't really need laser. Um, I I don't have a super prominent Adam's apple, so I wasn't trying to get that shaved down. Otherwise, if it was, I would have.
Yeah.
And I was, and like breast implants weren't really something I was super keen on. Although I have a fun story about that after.
Wait, did you grow breasts with estrogen? Because I
Yeah,
have never seen you. You did grow breasts with estrogen.
yeah, I did. They weren't very big. They're still not very big. I
Yeah,
could probably get by the rest of my life without getting them removed because they're not that big. But without my shirt, it's still like man boobs, like
yeah,
actual boobs, like gynecomastia.
yeah.
Okay.
And just to remind for those who might forget, you had said that you were a late bloomer. So when you went on hormones at 17 or whatever, you didn't have facial hair, not
Yeah, I
dark
didn't really
facial
have
hair.
facial
So
hair.
it just wasn't an issue really for you. It's fascinating, that part of it. Because we're going to
Mhm.
go into the detransition soon. Anything else? Go on,
Yeah.
Mia.
Well, just the actual, and so no complications. Did you heal well? Is it what you expected it to be, or are you dealing with, you have to manage the wound, which it's still a wound now, all these years later.
Yeah. So like the dilating goes okay, and so one of the most difficult parts about the dilating is not only the mismatch of the tissue, but it's that there's a muscle
Mm.
halfway in, and there's part of the colon that's sticking through the muscle. And muscles, they want to contract,
Yeah.
and so if you don't dilate, that muscle will slowly close up. So I actually have like gauged ears. I used to have like basically big holes
Yeah. Yeah.
in my ear up to 3/4 of an inch. And I took them out, actually, the piercings, for that surgery. And then my ear closed so much by the time I couldn't get them back in. And now it almost kind of looks like it's kind of back to normal. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's the way that, like, essentially the muscle is kind of the same thing. The muscle really wants to kind of close up. That's why one of the reasons we have to keep dilating.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you kind of stop, that muscle is going to close up, and then getting it back up to where it was before is just going to be terrible. And so,
And I get
if,
the impression a lot of trans women find dilating a complete headache. They don't do it as much as they want, should. It just becomes this nightmare of I should dilate and avoiding dilating. Is that your experience, or how are you?
yeah, I mean, it became annoying and far too much to handle very quickly. And I mean, this is still during the honeymoon phase where I'm like, I am complete. Like things are going to be great. I have all these expectations about the future that are about to, I don't that I'm unwittingly about to get knocked over.
Ah.
Mm.
And I just within a few months slowly stop dilating. I mean, it's too much maintenance.
Is
It's
it
Yeah.
too.
painful, or is it just
It
what
is,
it?
yeah, because
Yeah.
like if you want to maintain a certain size and you do it enough, it might not be that painful. But if your goal is to be able to have intercourse,
Mm.
then you need a certain kind of size, which means you have to stretch it. And if anyone knows who has stretched their ears, it's really painful. And so
Yeah.
you basically have to push past your boundary by a little
Oh,
bit and sit within that discomfort for like 20, 30 minutes.
that's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
I'd
it's
hate
it's
that.
so not sustainable, like, at
And what is
all.
the impact of not dilating? Because I know a lot of people are not dilating.
Yeah. So with this particular surgery, the impact is a few things. The muscle um, closes up as much as it can. It's not like I haven't had any like I've spent large chunks of time not dilating at all, and so it's not like it's pinching so bad it's cutting off circulation, like the colon, but it is pinching enough. So like, this is getting a little bit gross, but here's the anatomy of the whole thing, right? Mucous membranes, the colon, produce mucus pustules, these tiny little packets of liquid, and they're also getting rid of dead blood cells. And so it's constantly producing a kind of mucus, mostly liquid, mostly like water, a little bit of mucus. And when this muscle isn't pinching, it kind of just slowly comes out normally. And it's very clear, and it's not in and of itself isn't like super gross. It does smell like a colon, but it's not producing like food waste, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but once you stop dilating and that muscle kind of pinches, then the liquid and the mucus pustules begin to accumulate on the inside part of it. And it's a mucous membrane, so it's also absorbing water, right? It's releasing water and absorbing water at the same time. And so it's depositing the mucus pustules that have the dead cells in them, and then it reabsorbs the water. And if you just let this process go and go and go and go, it'll just accumulate this goo. Essentially, it's all these blood cells. It shares properties with fecal matter, but it's not food waste. It's just dead blood cells, and so if it can accumulate enough until you get these little soft brown nuggets that kind of resemble poop, but it's more like a paste in a sense, and it smells gross. And
Okay.
if you
So
don't
you
dilate,
have
it'll build
no
up pressure until it
choice.
comes out.
Yeah, you've got no choice. You have to maintain, dilate. That's.
And
Do you
if
have
you
a kind
don't,
of like?
I wonder what happens, because I bet you some, homeless trans women are not dilating. I've met so many who've said, I didn't dilate, I didn't dilate.
Yeah.
What happens in the end if you just don't maintain? I wonder.
Yeah.
You'll have many episodes of accumulating enough pressure and goo in there that the dam breaks and it kind of comes out.
Okay.
Okay.
And then all day long you're kind of worried about more and more of it coming out, and it's
Okay.
it's it's
Okay.
it's, it's pretty gross.
It's really difficult. This needs to be known.
Yeah.
Anybody who goes for this surgery, they need to know this information.
Anyone considering it, right? The information, I assume, was absolutely not available to you when you were sold the Cadillac of surgeries.
Right.
Am I correct?
It might have been in some fine print in a stack of documents that I had to sign for the surgery, but
Yeah.
no one had any vested interest in helping me understand the reality of these surgeries.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, can we go to the detransition and this just gorgeous essay that has been lodged in my mind since the first time I read it? It's just such an incredible story to me. How did detransition come about?
Yeah. So, about a year and a half after surgery, the honeymoon phase begins to wear off,
Yeah.
and so a little part of this story is I drug my girlfriend into a polyamorous relationship because I'm like, now that I have the surgery, I need to know what it's like to date a guy. And I found myself now being complete, trying to see if intercourse works and trying to see if fitting this kind of, now I'm a woman, can I just be a woman in a straight relationship? Does this even work? It's like I have to have the answer to this question. And
Mm.
it doesn't. Surgery, intercourse doesn't work. It doesn't stretch. Like I either find the foot to my Cinderella slipper or it ain't happening. And
Oh,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
And then I had begun to realize for the first time, like, why I don't feel happy trying to fit into this hyper feminine role. I begin to see the first glimpses that some of what I think a woman is, or what these feelings are based off of is stereotypes. Even I don't quite have the language for it. And that relationship falls apart, and it's just me and my girlfriend again. And I begin to let go of looking and passing as female and begin to slot back into this androgynous comfort zone.
Okay.
I don't realize yet that what has been propelling me this whole time is autoandrophobia, but it is still manifesting. Go
Can
ahead.
we pause on that? What's that? Define that for me.
So it's this hatred of being male. It's the hatred of yourself being male or masculine. When I use the term autoandrophobia, I'm really thinking, you know, running away from masculinity, manhood, or being a man, running away from my own biology, or at least what I'm projecting has to follow from my biology.
Okay, that's actually a really useful term to add to my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, and so I fit back into this androgynous space, and I'm kind of right back where I was when I was a teenager after starting hormones. And I stopped caring how strangers kind of perceive me. I tell my friends, still use, she, her pronouns. I still want to be a woman, but I just don't, I'm not trying to do it with stereotypes necessarily anymore. So people, random stranger could say he, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm over it.
Okay.
But I'm still very much internally like, I'm not a guy. And so that kind of releases a lot of the tension that kept me down this path. And then I'm trying to think of how much, like a few years after I moved to Seattle, me and my girlfriend moved to Seattle, and the cultural bubble here is very different. This is when kind of queerness starts to come onto my radar. More people identify as queer. More people, I feel like, I don't know, because maybe it was just the change of the time or the location or both, but it had felt like I had truly stepped into the bubble of identity politics, where everybody was identifying as part of some group to fit in. I didn't really recognize it at the time of everyone moving their locus of control externally and making themselves secure by the group that they belong to. That's never really been my style.
Mm.
And I remain in denial about I still identify as trans. I get a job. I'm working in tech a little bit at the time. I tell everyone that I'm transgender, prefer female pronouns. I feel bad using the ladies' restroom. Um, and I stay like this for a few years actually, and then it's not until the pandemic happens, and I'm living with a friend, someone I became best friends with, 2019, and we just clicked on we clicked on sense of humor. We clicked on, like, we just vibed together. We really enjoyed each other's company. And the pandemic happens, and then this huge cultural shift happens, and my friend who struggled with a lot of her own difficulties in childhood, been through a lot of crazy things, moved to the city to make something of herself, joined a programming boot camp and did a lot of hard work and tried to build herself up and had a lot of agency. And then the pandemic happened, and then we were all worried about health issues, and she was worried about the place she was living, the people she was living with not being COVID conscious. And so I invited her to live with me. And so it's the three of us, in a studio that eventually turned into a 2-bedroom. But I didn't really realize that, like, what I was kind of inviting in, and I think she had great intentions, and she's a good person at heart, but just really fell hook, line, and sinker for a lot of wokeness, and just slowly got rid of, just volunteered her agency for victimhood. And I saw my best friend descend into, like, what felt like madness to me. And I was just like, I'm like George Floyd riots are happening. She's worried she's going to die if she goes out of the apartment. She's going to get shot by a police officer.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm over here like, I'm not like I think that there's a problem. Like how could there be so much smoke without any fire? But I was still kind of inoculated from a lot of the craziness because I was listening to podcasts like Joe Rogan, listening to like Sam Harris's podcast. I knew about the student chaos at Evergreen, like within a year of it happening, and And I'm listening to the stats about police killings, and I'm like, things aren't lining up here. I need to have conversations with my friend. But I also know conversations are kind of hard to have. And so I'm listening to YouTube videos. This guy named Anthony Magnabosco, who's a practitioner of street epistemology.
Okay.
And if anyone here has heard of street epistemology, they know of Peter Boghossian. And actually, Peter wasn't on my radar at all at this time. But I had been watching a man use techniques to try and diffuse and to try and spark curiosity and to focus on, how we know what we know instead of the what. To try to we need to be able to work through politics and to figure out what the truth is and have conversations. And I'm just like, I'm trying my best to work through conversations. And it's difficult when you're just over and over and over being emotionally steamrolled, and eventually like what feels like emotional blackmail, like where you feel like you can't even describe the reality that you're seeing in front of your face without fear of someone exploding on you. And you know what I mean? Like my friend had essentially adapted the coping mechanism of trying to control the people, their actions, what they say, and what they think to try and make herself feel secure internally. And I don't think she knew that that's what she was doing. I didn't know that's what she was doing. I couldn't recognize because like I don't know what healthy relationships look like. I don't know what healthy boundaries look like. I'm just bumping up against things trying to figure it out. I don't realize what's happening, and it's one of the most unhealthy relationships I've been in. And during this pandemic, me and my girlfriend basically cede the cultural atmosphere to my friend. And my friend is just constant doom scrolling with insomnia. It's just like everything she's seeing is becoming her world.
Mm-hmm.
Her mental model is seeing all this evidence, in a way that we weren't involved to deal with the onslaught of social media, and to her it all just feels completely real. And all three of us stopped talking to each other. Like it literally harms the relationship with me and my girlfriend. There's distance between us even. And it's not that because she feels the same way. It's just that we're all in fight or flight 24/7, just trying to avoid landmines, and they're everywhere. And everyone's just in a corner like this all the time. And it begins to really mess me up. Like what I needed was to set boundaries, have healthier conversations, and to stand my ground, to have my own agency. And instead what I was doing is I was just avoiding conflict at all costs. And that eventually manifested in just me waking up at 5 a.m., sick to my stomach, in the fetal position, huddling in front of the heater, trying not to shiver, disassociating because I don't, because I'm so unaligned from myself that I've completely lost the ability to read any of my internal signals. I am instead of a discomfort arising and then me being curious, wanting to understand more, try to understand where's discomfort coming from, what's causing this, try to map out what's going on. Anytime there was discomfort, I'm just full speed in the opposite direction.
But can I ask, so it's your friend plunging into the extreme paranoia, but in a kind of woke identity politics sense, that causes you to question identity politics and wokeness, and that then leads you to question your own transgender identity because it's all tied together. Am I correct there?
Not quite. It's essentially my inability to understand my own internal signals, my inability to set boundaries, and it's not for a little while I'm like, maybe I'm the crazy one. If there's this much smoke, there must be fire.
Okay.
And then it gets to a point where very basic logic is breaking down, like very, very basic logic. We literally can't even settle on a definition of racism because my friend cannot be consistent with her own definition of racism.
Okay.
It's two things. It's that kind of disalignment with myself. And then eventually I find an outlet where I begin to. So there was a year where I identified as non-binary during this time. That was actually a helpful stepping stone away from the trans identity.
Yep.
And then I found an outlet where I was working on my own project. I was building my own project, keeping myself busy. I succeeded in a narrow domain, and then as soon as I needed to do something else as related to this project, my normal approach of like just brute forcing and nose to the grindstone, zoom all the way in until it's done, began to break down, because what I needed to do was really zoom out. I needed to zoom out and take a better look at what was going on in a holistic sense, not even just in my project, but just why am I procrastinating so hard and I can't even read my own internal signals? So it was, and I basically jumped from this project to this thing to that thing, all in kind of different domains, and all of them failed because the brute force attempt was failing, because there was a deeper problem with procrastination, right? There was a I was being propelled by forces I did not understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally found myself in a position where I'm like, I can't continue like this. Like I just can't. I have to figure things out. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm making a bunch of assumptions I don't know. And so my friend's bugging me, like, we should read this book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I start to read that book, and the book is about, normally I wouldn't read a book like that. I'm like, that's fine. I know what my problem is. I'll figure it out. But I'm so at wit's end that I start putting everything on the table. And I read this book and I start looking back at my past with my mom, and I'm like, wow, we had a terrible relationship. And my dad, oh my God, there's so much abuse there. And I'm like, oh my goodness, my friend when I was a teenager, he just manipulated me and physically intimidated me into agreeing with him. Oh my goodness, my relationship in my own house right now, I'm being manipulated. What the hell? And I just like, I'm able to like re-understand all of these relationships. And I see the lines where I should have drawn boundaries. All of these things start to come into focus.
Hmm.
And once I start to understand that, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I want to have conversations. Let's go back to street epistemology. And then Peter pops up. And then for the last few years, I'm like, all I want is for somebody to apply street epistemology to identity politics and woke ideas. And then Peter pops up, and I'm just like, this is my guy. $100 on him, And up until this point, a lot of the public intellectuals shied away from the trans issue. I think if Sam Harris would have put his hat in the ring, I'm actually not sure where he stands on it, but like 5 years earlier, he could have saved me quite a few years.
I think this all the time, the cowardice of public figures, that the public intellectuals, that they did not take on this insane belief, they have a lot to answer for. They could have saved a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so carry on with Peter.
They were already, on everything else. They were speaking out. They knew what they were avoiding. We all knew what they were avoiding.
Yeah.
It feels worse than those who didn't know. They did know. And they were clever, and they were public figures. Sorry, but carry on. Carry on.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. And so I see, he pops up onto my radar, and I'm immediately kind of consuming a lot of his content. And then, I also start listening to like a little bit of Andrew Doyle. I find the Trigonometry podcast. I essentially was kind of narrowed in lightly with a few things. And then this is when I really expanded. And then I see a video, because I'm like, things are going weird on college campuses, and I'm trying to talk about this at the same time, like well before I abandoned my trans identity. And so I see a clip of Peter, I think at Portland State, where he has, he's trying to do his thing, and you have people screaming from the rooftops, and then he kind of gets surrounded by people, and then they're just being so incoherent about what they're saying, and he's just being super polite and just being really curious, and like, and they're just like throwing all of these intentions on him. And then I watch another one of his videos, and it's with him, Billboard Chris, and James Klug, and they go to PSU, and then I see his sign. It's like, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And at this time I hadn't really put too much thought into trans children, because I'm like, well, I always felt that way, so I guess there must be trans kids. And I didn't know what puberty blockers really were, because I didn't take them, but I mean, I could infer, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, yeah, you want to try and live in past the opposite sex the best you can. Stopping puberty seems like that makes sense. You know, that's kind of like where I was. And then I saw this, and I'm like, ooh, this is exciting. Like like initially I'm not like, oh no, they're touching my topic. I'm just like, okay, cool, someone's touching my topic. Like, I would love to help communicate about this topic. And they start asking the very basic questions, like, what does it mean to be transgender? And I'm like, I know what that means. It means I was born in the wrong body, you know? And then people answer with similar things. They're like, well, what does that mean? And then it doesn't take a few whys before I realize that I don't have any good answers.
Yeah.
You know, this
Yeah.
little model I had built turns to sand and falls between, falls through my fingers. And I'm just like, huh, interesting. And I don't, it's hard to say exactly how it starts, but I had a lot of curiosity about it. And so I watched more and more content. And then the more I watch, the more I'm like, no one has any good answers for what it means to be transgender. I guess I have what I think it means. And then I have my friend saying that they're not fully transgender. And I'm like, what do you mean fully transgender? You're thinking about taking cross-sex hormones? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then what do you mean by transgender? Like I have all these little kind of clues around me. I'm like, well, I guess people identify as non-binary. What does it have to do with being transgender? From my perspective, being non-binary just means I reject stereotypes and categories. And then being transgender means I'm going to modify my body. Lo and behold, that's completely changed. Now there's
Mm.
this whole umbrella, and there's this thing called gender identity. And I'm just like, what is all this stuff? And then I started hearing people talk about the medical aspect of it. Not just that there are no good studies, but just like the logic behind it. And I'm like, I do remember about a decade ago someone saying, isn't it weird that being transgender is the only psychological illness that gets treated physically? And I'm like, huh, that is really weird. And then I find myself at this time watching these videos being like, that is really weird. And then it's just like over the course of a month, these ideas, I'm like, something is here. I'm like, I'm still trying to tackle what's wrong because I don't know what's wrong. And I begin to, I'm looking at relationships with my parents, and then I'm already thinking that I'm starting to, I've made it, I've maybe this, maybe I don't know why I'm transgender. And then I replay visiting my father, and then my mom tells me I didn't know beforehand that he was a meth addict, and I'm like, that explains why he would just explode all the time. That explains my disassociation. And then she told me that it wasn't just me, it was everyone else that he would tell to be a man. And then I just remembered, and then it's like I replayed that how did when did you first know you were transgender? I played that scene back in my head, and it's like I was watching the movie from a different camera angle.
You see, I'm really the belief part of it you're describing. So, the psychiatrist who first outlined this overvalued idea, this overvalued belief that all consumes a person, he says that they can only take hold when there are no countervailing perspectives available in a person's life to challenge the belief and lessen its grip. And that the way out of it is to expose people to these countervailing perspectives, the ideas that challenge the belief. And that's what happened to you when you came across Peter Boghossian's video, and people are asking the questions that nobody ever asked you, and nobody in the culture was asking because everybody was too afraid to ask those questions. Do you think, if going way back to when you first decide that you're trans, if the debate had been on and people had been talking about it openly and asking those questions, and if people in the medical world had asked you, what do you mean, what does trans mean, and if there had just been more countervailing perspectives available in your life, do you think you would have still locked in and believed yourself to be trans? It's a hard question, I guess. It's hard to put yourself back there.
I feel like it must have. I imagine it would help. would have helped a little bit. It's very possible, probably likely, that I would have been so committed because I fought through so much friction because I was so convinced by this idea. But I can tell you what really would have helped. So essentially, I had spent most of my life telling myself that my father was behind me, he was in my past, he had no control over me, and I didn't care and it didn't matter. I wanted nothing to do with him. And then when I went back, I saw that my father had caused the gender dysphoria. That specific wording, that I had realized, not only was I not free of my father, but I had inadvertently centered him at the core of my identity. I had built an identity around rejecting him.
Okay.
And once I realized that, I almost felt like I wanted to toss the identity like a hot potato. And if someone could have helped me understand that that's what was really happening, that would have helped.
Okay.
Right? It's you can't just, like, someone. It was one person in particular who would, like, later, even after surgery, I was friends with, was just like, dude, there's something going on with your dad. Like your dad and your past, there's something there. But instead of, like, you can't tell people, what's going on. People have to really figure it out for themselves, and it was very much like I was just defensive, and his approach was not helping at all. I would just double down. It was very much like, no, well, you're wrong. You're something with your dad there. And I'm just like, you don't know me, but if someone would have helped me kind of get around my own barriers and to help me come to that realization that this identity was really about my father, I might have let it go way, way, way earlier. Like if that initial psychiatrist, if I'm, here's the answer that I think is correct. If I would have been allowed to go through more puberty to kind of start to kind of grow out of it, and I would have had a psychiatrist smart enough to help pinpoint where it started and to help me get there on my own comfortably, and I'd come to that realization, I probably would have been free from all of this.
Well, am I right? Your psychiatrist was transgender.
Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't have expected them to. It was a huge
Well,
conflict of
more than
interest.
that, you at your very most vulnerable state as a young boy, you were 17, you met a clinician who was ideologically inclined and therefore, I would say, mistreated you, like it gave you ideologically based distressed treatment. Do
Yeah.
you align with the extreme overvalued idea as a way of understanding what you went through?
Can I just, before you answer that, so I've been dying to ask you because
Sorry, I was waiting for you, Mia.
no,
I thought
on
she was
this
gonna finish
on this
and I would
topic,
ask.
it's just okay. So I gave that talk in Albuquerque at the end of September about the extreme overvalue belief, and I framed trans in that way. And then your essay came out in October, and it's just the paradigmatic case of the extreme overvalue belief, the progression of it, and then the collapse of it. Is that coincidence, or did you hear my talk? And did my talk have any bearing on you writing this essay?
That's a good question. I do remember watching that talk. It's hard to say exactly when. I do know that I have enjoyed much of your content, especially your conversations, and I, I know that, like, this episode's mostly about kind of my story, but I'm also excited to connect with you at some point because I love your perspective about the medical history of different medical malpractices and just cultural hysteria, cultural phenomena that happen. It's so fascinating, and there's a good chance that it inspired it. I mean, after that talk, I started using the term highly overvalued belief because I find it
Okay.
really useful. So I might have found some parallels with, I'm sure it inspired it a bit.
Okay. And you see how your story is exactly it I assume it's just coincidental, but well, this is how did you already understand yourself in that way? And you talked about the collapse of the belief. That's the incredible part about the essay, is when you just talk about, you scrutinized a sacred belief that was central to your identity. It fell apart and the whole thing collapsed. That's
Yeah.
the extreme overvalue belief. That's fascinating to me. You already saw that in yourself, though, I assume.
Yeah. So when I had come to that realization, very quickly, it was like my essay. They called it the Cascade of Clarity because the cascade really encapsulates it. It was like,
Yeah.
when our I'm going to get into a little bit about the human brain here. So, like, before this, I had actually read this book called How Minds Change from David McRaney because I'm very much trying to understand why the brain holds on to beliefs so firmly, because changing minds is so hard, especially when people believe things that are against their own self-interest. And
Mm.
all of us have been caught at one point or another being like, how could that other group do something when it's against their own self best interest? Well, it's
Yeah.
because all of us are doing it all the time. The brain is essentially just building mental models of the world, trying to make predictions of cause and effect. And the How Minds Change was really informative to try and help me understand kind of how the mind kind of works in that way. And so that was already on my radar. And then once you essentially have like a hierarchy of beliefs that are supported by each other. And at the very core are your beliefs about your identity.
Yeah.
And not only are those beliefs the kind of foundation for the rest of your beliefs, but they're core to your survival. And we have evolved to protect identity-based beliefs because if your tribe is too busy worrying about whether we're part of the in group or the out group or this or that, or am I really one of you, the other tribe just comes in and cleans house. And so, like, um, we are evolved to have at least some resistance with those beliefs. And so when you pull one out as like a support beam, everything just because everything has to resettle.
Yeah.
And if it's a really central pillar to the whole thing, then the whole thing could collapse. And that's literally what it felt like. It was like weeks of just emotional turbulence because I'm like, well, if I'm wrong about my own gender identity, like, what else am I wrong about? And then,
Yeah.
my mind will go here and think about this one thing. Oh, there's a brand new memory that looks entirely different because now I have this entirely new framework for understanding what happened. Oh my God, I can't believe I did this. Oh my goodness, I went to Thailand on my own. I was willing to die. Like, oh my goodness, I was homeless in the shelter, and I almost like all these little situations where you're just like, what was I thinking? You just all these beliefs come cascading down, and it's out of your control too. A lot of our beliefs, we don't really, maybe you have influence over your beliefs, but a lot of them are for you're either convinced or you're not. They
Yeah.
kind of form in the subconscious. And
Can't
so
make yourself believe.
yeah, it was wild. I knew it was happening while it was happening too, because I had read about it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming to the end. Shall we ask our last questions?
Yeah, I'd like to. What I wanted to ask about was that I do know that there is, a huge tendency towards suicidal thoughts and very, very dark thoughts post medical transition when it goes wrong. I know it's a very vulnerable point. I also know that there's a love story in the background here that maintained all the way through. And I'm wondering, is this connected? Did this get you through? Did despair engulf you?
For the detransition or after the
Yeah,
detransition.
yeah,
The closest, so I had a struggle after detransition, but it had less to do with, I feel like, the transition itself. So essentially, what allowed me to help figure things out was I stepped out of like the oppressive atmosphere of my apartment, went on walks after years of being of mostly staying inside from the pandemic, like getting outside. And then I began. I was taking edible gummies like weed to be able to help try and run from some of the anxiety instead of face it. And so I started smoking instead of edibles, and I would go on walks and smoke. And that, at the very beginning, allowed me to get out of fight or flight. Let my prefrontal cortex wake up, begin to explore and be curious. And it allowed me to branch out very quickly, which ultimately led to the kind of cascade. And then very quickly, smoking weed became a vice because it goes from, you only need a little bit to kind of feel good to you need a whole bunch of it just to feel normal. And then I began the branching out and listening to new voices slowly became doom scrolling. And those two things threw a kind of wrench in my recovery for another like year and a half, 2 years, unfortunately. And so relating to the detransition itself, I since detransitioning, I don't spend too much time ruminating even on the physical parts that I've lost. I've always been a very driven person. And so even in the midst of, in an uncontrollable weed smoking, doom scrolling spiral, in the forefront of my mind is how do I get control of my life? How do I write about my experience? How do I help other people? How do I stop procrastinating? How do I build myself up? It's just like the same kind of driven focus that I used to have that was like, I'm going to Thailand, I'm getting the surgery. I have it right here. And this time I have the ability to aim it.
I think my last question is basically the same in a different way. When you let go of the belief, or when the belief finally loosened its grip, you'd medicalized in the name of the belief. You'd done things to your body, you had things done to your body in the name of the belief. But was there a peace and a relief that came over you when you felt free of the belief, and did you feel like you had come back to reality? Could you sense it?
Yeah. As soon as it became clear what caused the gender dysphoria, and I let go of the belief, the most, even though it was very emotionally turbulent, the most dominant emotion I felt was relief. I'm like, this is it. I had been inadvertently doing this to myself the whole time. This is the cause. And now it's gone. Just let it go.
Okay.
And where was your girlfriend in all this? Because she fell in love with a trans woman who had vaginoplasty. She rolled with that, and
Yeah.
now you've taken testosterone, I believe, which is
Yeah.
very interesting for a lot of detransitioners who have had vaginoplasty, because there's a myth, or certainly it's often said in the meetings, that they shouldn't, or they're afraid to take testosterone to in their detransition process because of vaginoplasty. They fear things like hair growing and things like that. Now I know you had a colon
Mm.
what's called vagina colonplasty or
Yeah.
something.
Colovaginoplasty.
Thank you, colon. So it's not the same, but I do know that's an issue. But you've taken testosterone, visually quite successfully. Like
Yeah. The facial
you've
hair
got a
does do
beard.
a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, it does do a lot of lifting. Where's your girlfriend? Just before we finish, where's her head go in all this?
Yeah. So we were, I felt like we were kind of attached to the hip starting from the beginning. And then even when I went into kind of my androgynous style, like, I think I feel like, so I've always struggled to really communicate, right? To be a good communicator, to, develop rich, emotionally engaging conversation and connections. And so, there's so many ways I could write a huge list about how I was a terrible boyfriend in some ways. But in terms of like the transitionary process, I felt like that's never really been a huge thing for her. Like more than anything, it's about being, communicating and being honest and opening up and allowing each other to be vulnerable. It's been more about being vulnerable than I think she ever really cared about how I looked. You know, when 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 I decided, I'm like, okay, I need to go back on testosterone. It didn't cross my mind that it would even bother her, and I don't think it ever did. You know, so I mean, she's bisexual. I'm bisexual, so I think that
Okay.
helps. Of course, if either of us were monosexual, that would definitely introduce complications.
Yeah.
But I mean, she stuck with me through a lot. She
It's
even if the
very
facial hair
interesting.
bugged her.
I
I
do.
imagine.
Will she come to DC? I'd love to meet her.
Yes, actually, she would love to come. We're trying to plan that out now.
We're trying valiantly to have people help us with the sponsorship. It's become extraordinarily expensive as people, over 70 people. Oh, it'll keep me up at
Yeah,
night until March. However, if we can get the funding, we'd certainly be delighted to help.
excellent.
We're doing our best, so you just stay in touch with us, and
Yeah,
we'll do
I'll
our
send you a
best with that.
follow up email. We'll see about how to
Do.
answer that so we can, purchase quick sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Could I ask? I just, Stephen Levine will be giving a talk at the event, and the title, "Transition is a Family Event." I think it's very apropos. I think more people should think like that. That, for example, if my husband decided to do any sort of body modification, my feeling is, well, is this part of is this a decision that should be, as yourself, Mia, if your partner decided to do some sort of body modification, I feel like I have a say in it or something. Am I mad? But do you understand? It's an interesting point.
If my husband wanted to
No,
transition,
well,
he'd
no,
be
I'm
out
not
the
saying.
door
I'm talking
before
about.
you could say, "Oh, do
Wait, wait,
gynephilia."
wait, wait.
Let's
I'm
tone
talking
it
about.
down. Maybe just like a plate in the lip or crocodile scales on the back or something.
I would not be into any of it. I'm gone.
What about, let's
Sorry.
say, ears pinned or nose I don't know. I just think it's an
A
interesting point
rebellious
for
belly
long-term
button piercing.
A
At our age, I would have a really hard time with any of it. I'd
tattoo?
think
No,
more
I'm going there.
midlife crisis. I'd have a really hard time.
Anyway, thank you
Yeah,
so much for
thank you. That
everything
was
you gave us.
lovely.
It was such generous. It's a real generosity to speak so freely and truthfully. I think it helps people, and
Yeah,
your thoughtfulness really, I think, adds a lot of dimensions that are very important. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. I think I'll
thank
just
you.
mention, since the detransition, I've kind of been obsessed with trying to understand even more about beliefs and how they work and how the human mind works. I'm just like, what happened to me? Why
Yeah,
am I dysfunctional? So I've kind of had like a mountain of books that's kind of surround me that I'm trying to learn from. And as soon as I get this writing habit kind of dialed in, I'm looking forward to taking all the reflection that I've been doing and to try to figure out how to help provide perspective, understanding, and especially practical tools for anybody related to this topic. So thank you so much for giving me the
thank
opportunity to
you.
share my story.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
both for what you do so much.